When we think about plants and flowers, we often think about springtime and love, maybe sharing these as a gift or having them in your home so they look beautiful. What you might not think about are all of the times that these plants want to unalive you. So now we're going to delve into 5 top poisonous plants, some of which could unalive you within inside of 15 minutes. Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you are new. So today we're going to get into another one of our deadly series, but today we're looking at deadly plants. Let me know what you think. What sort of plants are you expecting to be in this list? And have you come across any plants yourself that are deadly? And what did you make of them? Let me know in the comments below. Let's get into our list of top 5. The first plant that we're going to get into today is water hemlock, or Cicuta malucata. This is a member of the carrot family, and it's quite easy to see how it could easily be mistaken for a great many other plants that you might see along the verges or embankments along rivers. It's easily mistaken for a great many other plants, but if you mistakenly take this plant, you would know about it. This is one of the deadliest plants we're going to cover today. So let's get into its distribution. Distribution of water hemlock. This particular plant can be found in marshy or boggy, swampy sort of areas. You'll often find it associated with water, hence its name. So you'll find it alongside rivers or around pools. Anywhere where there's going to be some water, you're likely to find water hemlock. It's located in America, in Mexico, in South America, and also in Canada. The identifying features of water hemlock. This is a very tall plant, and it can grow between 0.6 to 1.9 meters, which is between 2 and 6 feet tall. It stands very tall with an elongated, long, hairless stem, which is usually a reddish purple colour completely. So that is one of its identifying features. So if you are looking out for that sort of deep purple stem that you might find, and all of the leaves fall below the flower head. So the flower head terminates the plant. So the flower head's at the very top and the leaves fall below. The leaves are odd pinnate, and what that means is that one leaf is divided into leaflets, and those leaflets form between 5 and 7 smaller leaflets along the full length of the leaf, with one odd single leaf forming the very tip of the leaf. The edges of the leaf are serrated, which is another identifying feature. So it has this point to the serration along the edge of the leaf and a pointed tip. Those are some of the key identifying features with this particular plant. When researching this plant, there are a few different ways that the leaves can grow. Some show something slightly more feathery, and others show something where there are many leaves coming off one central stem, forming lots of leaflets. So it can be a little bit confusing as to exactly what the leaves are going to look like. It really does depend on the region. So if you are looking at the leaves and they look similar to how I've described, and you have this reddish purple stem, you very likely have water hemlock. The flower head for the water hemlock is very similar to many that you'll see in other regions. It has this, sometimes it will look like a flat plane of white flowers, or there'll be lots of little globular heads of white flowers. Each of these small globular heads all are made up of lots of little white flowers. So there's many white flowers that form one flower head. You will see this commonly with many other plants. But what would water hemlock do to you? This plant means business either way, so you can either consume it or just brush up against it. Either way, the toxins from water hemlock will enter your body. All parts of this plant are poisonous, and so the plant in general should just be avoided. You shouldn't go anywhere near this plant. I don't really think there's any good reasons that you'd want to, and I personally recommend avoiding. But if you do decide to touch this plant, or maybe somebody that you're with is inexperienced and they touch this plant or consume some of it, what's going to happen to you? So initially you're going to start to drool. You're going to produce quite a lot of saliva in your mouth. Then you're going to start to feel a bit nauseous. Following this nausea, you're going to then start to have strong abdominal pains. Following on from these pains, you're going to start to get a bit of a tight chest. You're going to be a little bit wheezy. Your chest will start to feel tight, and breathing will feel like it's starting to get difficult for you. This will start to induce feelings of dizziness, and you'll start to get a little bit lethargic. Then you enter a bit of a phase where you start to feel okay, and actually you then go into a phase of delirium where you're almost toxically positive and you feel great. But this shows that you're in the final stages of the poison from this plant. You slowly start to get difficulty breathing and your heart starts to struggle. So, as the poison progresses, your heart begins to struggle under the weight of the toxins inside your body. Your kidneys begin to fail. Your body slowly starts to shut down. You lose control of your bowels. Then, slowly, you will start to enter a coma state, and following this, death will occur. Now, this plant only needs 15 minutes to go from drooling and feeling a bit sick to a coma and death. This plant is so deadly that it should definitely be one that you avoid. What can it commonly be mistaken for? The flower head is very similar to others in the carrot family, and so it can easily be mistaken for any other sort of wild carrot, wild parsnip, or celery. It can also easily be mistaken for anything that has that signature sort of flower head, so anything like a cow parsley or a hogweed. Now, one thing that you need to know is how to identify this from all of those other plants. So look out for the region that it's growing in, look out for the location it's growing in, and look out for that red stem. That's going to tell you that you have water hemlock. It's advisable if you are somebody that likes to go out into nature, or you're somebody that likes to maybe go into waterways, that you can identify this plant, but also your children can identify this plant. Children absolutely love being out in nature and exploring, and one of the best ways that children explore plants is through picking them and playing with them. This is not a plant you want your children to be picking, so make sure you can identify water hemlock should you be in a region that you're going to find this plant locally. Plant number 2. Our next plant is the white snakeroot, or its scientific name, Ageratina altissima. This is another plant that's the flower head is made up of lots of small white flowers forming a flat platform. I don't know what it is about plants producing this type of flower head that just want to unalive you, but there are quite a few that have this very similar flower head pattern that mean you business. So let's look at the distribution. So where can you find white snakeroot? White snakeroot has a wide distribution across America and Canada, and it's usually going to be found in woodlands or densely packed areas. So along hedgerows or verges, anything like that where there's dense sort of vegetation, you're likely to find white snakeroot. What are the identifying features for white snakeroot? This is another tall plant, so it grows between 1.5 and 3 meters tall. Once you get this particular plant in an area, it tends to grow more densely every year. And so you'll start to sort of notice a patch of it, and that patch will get thicker and thicker every year. This plant is distributed by seed. So the seed sort of spreads into an area, and then a big cluster of these plants come up each year. It does prefer moist, fertile soils. And it does prefer full sun, although it can tolerate shade and it can tolerate less ideal soil conditions. But ideally, it wants something that's going to have lots of fertility. The leaves are deltoid or arrow-like in shape, and they form this point towards the tip. The edges of the leaves are serrated. The leaves that form further down on the main stem have quite a long stem for each leaf, whereas further up as you get towards the flower head, the leaves are almost completely stemless and come almost directly off the stem itself, which is one of its identifying features. The flower head of this plant is made up of lots of small white flowers. Each one of those small white flowers has 5 lanceolate elongated shaped petals, and all of those all together, you normally get between 5 and 7 of the small white flowers from one total flower head. And many of those sort of clusters all together form the complete flower head for this particular plant. So it's made up of lots of small white flowers. What would happen to you if you decided to consume white snakeroot? The main method for poisoning with this particular plant is ingestion through contaminated milk. So because this plant prefers sort of hedgerows or edges, that type of thing, where you have dairy cattle that maybe are a little bit hungry, or when the season is all sort of drying out and the grass isn't as good, cows can go and eat white snakeroot. Now they will start to suffer with muscular necrosis, so their muscles will start to sort of die off, and the cows themselves become quite sick. But while you're sort of going through the process of testing your cattle and finding out what could possibly be wrong with them, if they are dairy herd and you're still producing milk from them and you are consuming that milk yourself, then that is how you ingest this toxin into your own body and you become poisoned. Because of the strong links between this particular plant and poisoning through milk, it's also known as milk sickness. If you do consume some contaminated milk, the first thing that you're going to start to experience is a loss of appetite and a feeling of sort of sickness and nausea. So you're just going to sort of start to feel really quite unwell. After that has all sort of started, you're going to get strong abdominal pains and just general pains throughout your body. You're going to start to feel really quite sick. The toxin is then slowly working its way through your digestive system after you've ingested it. Following a period where you are feeling quite sick, you're then going to go through a period of having constipation and extreme thirst, where you just don't seem to be able to take in enough fluids. If you don't seek medical attention, tremors will start to begin and you'll start to experience some sort of hallucinations and some delirium. Following on from the delirium, that is then when you will enter a coma state, and after the coma state comes death. One of the issues with this particular plant is that symptoms can start days or even weeks after consumption. So you consume this and the toxins slowly work into your body and slowly begin to work. So you might not know necessarily that it was the plant or even the milk that had caused you to have this poison reaction. What can white snake root commonly be mistaken for? This plant is commonly mistaken for late bonesset, which is very, very similar looking, and there are many people that confuse these two plants. There's also a false nettle as well that has very similar shaped leaves, and so it can easily be mistaken for a couple of really very harmless varieties of plants that you'll find in very similar locations. Deadly plant number 3. Our next deadly plant is the castor bean, or Ricinus communis. Now, I know very well what you might be thinking. Castor bean, but I have consumed castor oil, and so it can't possibly be the same thing. But actually, it is exactly the same thing. And so I'm going to get into how it is that we can consume castor oil without taking in the harmful toxin, ricin, which is what will kill you in this particular bean. Where can we find castor beans? The castor plant prefers to have warmer climates, and so you're going to find this in Africa, America, Australia, oceanic islands. It has been largely distributed across Africa, with people moving the plants around to be able to grow them for the oils. Due to this plant's association with warmer climates, I'd be really interested to look at how is climate change going to affect the distribution of this plant. Is it going to start spreading into other regions that it wasn't previously found in? And will other people come up against this bean that have never seen it before and potentially consume it thinking it's safe? What are the identifying features of the castor bean plant? This is a beautiful evergreen plant and the leaves are really unique. They form a palmate type shape with between 5 and 11 points, lancelet points coming from one central, radiating from one central location. When the plant is quite young, the leaves are going to be a bright green colour, but as the plant begins to age, these turn into this sort of reddish green colour that makes it really quite strikingly beautiful to look at. The plant has separate male and female parts on one plant, so the male flowers are produced slightly below the female. This plant doesn't produce any petals, it just produces a cluster of white antlers which produce all of the pollen. Right above this is a bulbous, almost triangular-like shape, or like a few sort of triangular-like shape red growths, which are the female part of the plant. And this is wind distributed, so the pollen goes into the female parts of the plants, and that is where the beans are made. After pollination, the seed heads that are produced are red and quite spiky looking. They almost look a little bit like the sweet chestnut, sort of this bulbous, really sort of spiky growth. There are many of these lovely bright red growths that go across the plant after it's been pollinated, which make it again stand out and look really quite strikingly beautiful. As it ages, that outer casing will start to brown and then it will crack open and the beans are inside. What will happen to you if you were to consume castor beans? The beans of this particular plant, as the name suggests, contain ricin, which is a poison. After the process of extracting the oil, so after the manufacturing process of extracting the oils from the castor beans, the waste product of the beans still contains ricin and could still prove poisonous. The oil itself, once it's gone through its processing, is perfectly safe to consume. Doesn't contain any ricin. It needs to be heavily processed to ensure that there's no ricin, and there's lots of testing involved. But the waste product itself still contains enough ricin to prove deadly. The poisoning can occur in a number of different ways. Consuming the beans directly, or even inhaling enough of the dried powder during the oil process is enough to poison a person. Symptoms of ricin poisoning usually occur between 4 and 8 hours after you have consumed them or accidentally inhaled any of the dust, but it can take up to 24 hours for symptoms to begin. The symptoms are nausea, vomiting, and abdominal pains. As with many of the things, when you consume something your body doesn't like, it generally tries to expel it as quickly as possible by making you sick. But what happens with ricin poisoning is it starts to attack the cells of your gastric system, causing those cells to actually shed into your body. So what will then start to happen is you will then start to suffer from internal bleeding. So your organs themselves slowly start to fail. Because of you losing lots of fluids, your loss of fluids and loss of electrolytes slowly start to hinder your body's natural function, and organs slowly start to fail as they're not getting the right nutrients that they need, and they're not able to turn those nutrients into any sort of food for themselves. So mass organ failure slowly starts to begin. Due to the loss of fluids and electrolytes, your body starts to go into shock, which can cause death. Although there are not many cases of ricin-caused deaths or people dying from consuming castor beans, it is possible to die from this, so you must seek medical attention if you have come into contact with ricin. What can castor bean commonly be mistaken for? Looking at many of the plants, there's not very many that this can be commonly mistaken for. It has quite an unusual leaf shape and orientation. The seed pod is quite unique in terms of its bright coloration. So although that looks very similar to sweet chestnut is in a tree, this is in a shrub. So there's not very many things you can confuse it with. But I suppose if you were maybe younger or inexperienced and you found a load of beans and you were hungry and you ate them, that could potentially be one way that you get ricin poisoning. Deadliest plant number 4. Next, we're going to look at rosary peas, or its scientific name, Arborus precatorius. This is a particularly inconspicuous looking plant. It could almost be mistaken for something like a wisteria or any sort of pea-like plant. It's very, very beautiful. The peas themselves are very striking. They have this deep red colour with this black spot, which makes them really stand out. But the plant itself could be commonly mistaken for quite a lot of things. What is the distribution for rosary peas? This plant is native to Taiwan, Asia, and China. Although because it's very beautiful, it's been distributed across Australia, America, Mexico, and Brazil. How can you identify rosary peas? This is a beautiful climbing plant, and it can grow up to about 3 meters tall. So it's a nice tall plant that you can have inside your garden, looking absolutely wonderful when it goes to flower. It produces a lot of stems at the base of the plant, so there's lots and lots and lots of stems that come out of it, so it's quite sort of bushy and fills a good area. The leaves themselves are in pairs, and so there's between 8 and 14 pairs that go all the way up the 8 to 14 leaflets that go all the way up the leaf and end in a pair. So unlike lots of other plants that we've covered on this channel, it doesn't have one single leaf at the very top. It has pairs at the very top. The edges are smooth and rounded tipped and entire, so there's no serration or anything like that. It's lovely and soft looking with a great many leaflets. It has a lovely sort of dull green colour, so it really sort of stands out. The flowers themselves are a sort of light pink to light purpley colour, all depending on the variety that you have. And it has that typical pea-like shape with one sort of long curved petal at the top and a deeply divided petal underneath, and both sort of curved down almost like the beak of a bird. So it's very beautiful and sort of hangs down low. As with many peas, it produces a long seed pod. This seed pod starts to sort of thicken and swell with age as the peas inside slowly start to grow. Once it has aged, the pea pod itself will go brown and it will split along the seam of the pod, and you'll see inside just loads of these amazing deep red berries with these black spots. They're really quite striking. Each flower head is a cluster at the very top, and all of those clusters all come together to produce loads of these lovely, really striking bright red peas that are absolutely poisonous. What will it do to you if you were to eat any of the peas of this beautiful plant? The peas of this plant produce abrin, which is a toxin very similar to ricin, and so it works in a very similar way. The issue with these peas is that they are almost impervious to environmental damage, so they can survive high temperatures and also very low temperatures during processing. So it is not worth trying to process these peas and use them for anything, because the toxin inside can survive lots of different environmental conditions. Poisoning can occur in this plant either by ingesting the peas directly or inhaling. If you've sort of ground them up, if you sort of try to dry them and then you've ground them, if you inhale the abrin that way, you can still be poisoned. One of the main issues with these peas, because they're so striking and unusual, people turn them into beads and use them for things like necklaces and bracelets. So what can happen is, while you are not concentrating and maybe you're sort of chewing on your necklace or chewing on your beads, and you give these to a child, the toxin is still inside that pea. So even though you think it's been processed and it's a bead and it's not going to harm you, the toxin is still very much available in there for the pea to be able to use and to poison you with. So accidental poisoning is the most common way of being poisoned by the rosary pea. Symptoms usually occur within 8 hours, but it can take 1 to 3 days. It really all depends on your body physiology and the method of ingestion. So if you have inhaled the rosary peas or any sort of dust from them, then what's going to start to happen is you're going to start to feel a bit like you've got a cold. So you have a bit of a cough, you get a bit of a fever, your chest feels a bit tight, and you feel a bit wheezy. So all those sort of very first sort of cold-like symptoms you'll start to get with this particular thing. As the poisoning progresses, your lungs start to fill with fluids. So you're slowly starting to almost drown in your own fluids inside your body. As the fluids begin to build up inside your lungs, you start to get sort of quite hot and sweat. Because of the addition of the fluid inside your lungs, breathing gets even more challenging. And so you start to really struggle to breathe. That tightness of chest really does start to ramp up in those final stages of the poisoning with this particular plant. Due to the low oxygen circulating around your body because of your breathing difficulties, your skin can start to turn a blue colour. So you can start to look sort of quite Smurf-like almost as the toxin slowly starts to get into your body. If medical treatment isn't sought or is not successful, then slowly you'll start to have respiratory failure, and following that would be death. If you eat any of the beans, the method of poisoning is slightly different. So if you eat these peas, what will start to happen is you'll start to get abdominal pains, you'll start to feel quite sick, you'll start to vomit, and you'll also get diarrhea. As the symptoms slowly start to progress, because you're spending so much time in the bathroom trying to work out how to safely deal with this poisoning, you'll get severe dehydration. The more time that you spend in the bathroom, you start to notice blood starts to fill up inside the bowl as it starts to leave your body. Your blood pressure will begin to lower. If at this point you don't seek out any sort of medical intervention or any medical help, it's going to be pretty tricky for you. You'll slowly start to have seizures. Then you'll start to get hallucinations and you'll start to get dizzy, confused, disorientated. Slowly, everything starts to feel like it's shutting down around you. Over the next few days, your organs start to fail, starting with your liver, your spleen, your kidneys. As time progresses, and again, if you don't have the right medical intervention, then slowly you're going to start to have total organ failure. Your lower blood pressure as well is going to cause significant damage to your body. And shortly after that, the Reaper will come calling. What can you commonly mistake rosary peas for? The plant itself, I think, could easily be mistaken for any type of pea-like variety. It's almost even wisteria looking, although the plant's pointing in the wrong direction. But it has this beautiful climbing ability. It fills a large area. It's no wonder this has made it into horticulture as a beautiful variety. The peas themselves are quite striking. They're really very different to anything else. As I mentioned earlier, it's more common for you to accidentally poison yourself with the peas by turning them into a bracelet or a necklace or beads of any variety and then wearing those beads for a long period of time. The toxins can survive the environmental damage that you put them through to turn them into beans. Our fifth deadly plant. Our final plant is Nerarium oleander, or known as oleander. This particular plant has a wide distribution and is very beautiful. It's one that you could probably see in most horticultural establishments, and when I was looking it up, you can buy it online quite easily, but it has a very deadly secret. Where can you find oleander? There are a number of varieties of this particular plant. Because of its beautiful flowers and the way that the leaves look as well, it's widely distributed around the globe. It has originated in the Mediterranean, but because it's so beautiful, it has spread absolutely everywhere, with people putting it in their gardens and having it in planters outside their homes. It accepts a wide array of environmental conditions. It can survive lots of different types of soil, and it can survive sun or shade. It's quite a hardy plant. So this plant means business and can kind of survive anywhere. What are the identifying features? This is a beautiful evergreen shrub. It produces lots of different stems and lots of leaves, so it covers a nice wide area. So you can see why it's been welcomed by gardeners. It's a nice beautiful big shrub that can sort of be trained a little bit to cover quite an area. The leaf itself is an elongated lancelet shape in a beautiful deep green, and the rachis, or the stem in the middle of the leaf, is a pale sort of yellowy green colour. So it really stands out and it's quite striking. With it being an evergreen, it means that you get some beauty all year round. It's quite a tall shrub, so it grows to roughly 1.5 to 2 metres tall, and it can grow as wide as it can tall. So it really does cover a big area. It is beautiful. The flower is absolutely stunning, and it's anything from white to red and absolutely every variation of pink between. So there is an oleander for everybody. The leaves are almost rose-like in terms of, the petals are almost rose-like in terms of the way they look. So it has 5 petals that form the flower head, and you can see the visible antlers sort of sticking out from the centre of the plant. But the way that the petals grow and the shape of the petals and this slightly sort of ruffled edge gives it an almost rose-like appearance, which is where some of its many other common names come from, such as rosebay. So the actual shape and appearance of the flower is almost rose-like, so you can understand how it could be mistaken for certain rose-type varieties. What will oleander do to you? All parts of this plant are poisonous, but the poison, literally from the roots to the petals, it's the whole thing is poisonous, but the poison only works once it's been ingested. However, it does produce sap. So if you were to break any leaves or stems as you were moving this plant or manipulating it or anything, the sap itself can cause quite a severe skin rash and skin irritation. Some have attempted to use the oleander as medicine, and in some of the research I've done, there are some medicinal properties to this plant. However, I feel that because all of it is poisonous and you don't know how much of it you would need in order for it to have any sort of medicinal benefit, I don't think it is worth it. Some people have tried to use oleander to treat the before times. So the virus that we all had a little while ago that shut everything down, people were trying to use oleander to cure that, and unfortunately there were some really quite nasty consequences. If you do consume the oleander, so again, it has to be via ingestion to actually take on the full toxic effects of this plant. You'll start to get some stomach pain, you'll start to feel quite nauseous, and you will start vomiting. The plant is then sort of slowly trying to work its way through your nervous system. So you'll then start to feel quite dizzy. you'll have convulsions, you'll feel confused and a little bit disorientated as it slowly starts to affect your mind. It lowers your blood pressure and slowly starts to bring that down to a point where your heart rate then lowers. And so all of your body slowly starts to shut down. If you haven't received any sort of medical attention, or you haven't sought medical attention, or that medical attention isn't very effective for you, then it's slowly going to shut down your nervous system first. As your nervous system is shutting down, you'll start to get more dizziness, lethargy, depression. Slowly your body is starting to fail you a little bit, but from your mind. If you haven't had any successful treatment, then unfortunately death will follow. This usually takes between 1 and 3 days after consuming for the full effects to take place. So this particular plant is absolutely beautiful, but absolutely deadly. There are not very many people that have died from this particular plant, but all of it is poisonous. And so again, it is one of those plants that's worth knowing, worth being able to identify, especially as it is so globally available and you can even buy it in things like garden centres. What can it commonly be mistaken for? From looking online, there's really not very much that this can commonly be mistaken for. You can maybe see a couple of similarities. The flower looks similar to certain other things. The leaves look similar to certain other things, but not together. So there's not very much that you can confuse it for, which I suppose is quite a good thing. And I guess if you have bought this as a horticultural variety for your garden and you know what it is, then as long as you look after yourself while you're looking after the plant, then you'll probably be okay. Thank you so much for joining me today in another one of our deadly series. What did you think? Are you aware of any of these plants? Do any of them grow where you live? When I was doing my research for these, some of these actually grow where my sister lives, and I was quite intrigued to know if she's ever come across them before or ever seen any of them. These are not plants that I've ever really come into contact with, so although I do like to do species identification of UK wildlife, many of these are not available here in the UK or don't grow here, and so I'm not really aware of any of them. Some of them are very beautiful and some of them are fascinating. What do you think of the idea of poisonous plants? Let me know in the comments below. I'm probably going to look at doing some more of this in the series and looking at some other types of plants, maybe some region-specific ones, maybe some from the UK, some from America specifically, some from Asia, that type of thing. Let me know what you think and if you'd be interested in seeing that sort of thing. What's your favourite plant as well? I would absolutely love to know. I love speaking about anything to do with plants. So thank you so much for joining me. I really hope you found it interesting and I will see you in the next one. Thank you. See you soon. Bye.